Coming up, who are the most realistic options for the Nets with the 8th pick, and which player should they pull the trigger on? I'll answer that after this.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. This show is 100% free on all those great platforms. And on today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily to break down the most realistic options for the Nets with the 8th pick, which we feel they should prioritize, and what direction we think they'll ultimately go. I'm joined now by Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily, coming back for, I think this is his third appearance now on Locked On Nets since I took over the pod. And we're approaching draft day. It's coming rapidly. So we're here to talk about who are the most realistic options for the Nets with the 8th pick and what direction we ultimately think that they should go. And Lucas, just gaming out the board logically, the way that, I've been looking at it is Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper obviously going to be off the board. VJ Edgecombe off the board, it seems like. Probably Ace Bailey. We talked about him on a prior episode. Most likely going to be off the board. And then I put Trey Johnson also because I've been hearing some things from some draft people who there's a lot of people who are really high on him. So it seems unlikely that he gets to 8. The next 4 most likely guys, it seems like, would be Jeremiah Fierce, Canipple, Kaman Maluak, or Noah Asenge. And the Nets are going to be able to come away with one of those players. So of those 4, who would you be most excited about the Nets picking, and who do you think would be, the best option for them overall?
I think after, going back into it, I've written about, those are the first 4 players that I've written about on Nets Daily for exactly that reason. I expect one of those 4 to be there, for them to be among the leading candidates. I ended up on Kaman Maluak, actually, which I don't think is the consensus opinion. Any of those guys would be great to kickstart a rebuild, be the most exciting young talent. Canipple, just easily projectable, I think, good NBA player. Asenge was wildly intriguing. Fears, same thing, although I'm a bit lower on him than consensus. But anyway, Maluak is just giant, truly giant, can move laterally, has great touch. It's hard to imagine guys like that failing in the NBA. The one worry, I think, would be like, you see where the NBA is going. Everybody's attacking off closeouts. The kind of quote unquote more traditional 5s may not be able to play 36 minutes in a playoff game all the time. But like, this guy is a great prospect to me. And I know people that have him top 5, have him, top 3, 4 in some cases. And I think all of that is warranted.
And, I think a lot of fans are probably, I think there's a lot of Nets fans who are probably hoping that wasn't the guy that you were going to say, because it seems like a lot of them want the lead ball handler. They view the upside. They view like the star potential in that regard. And you just said, it would be difficult to see Maluak failing. So you think that he has a high floor. So are you viewing him more as a floor prospect and prioritizing floor more, or do you think that he has the ceiling as well and he could really pop and be something, more than what he is now? And I think some of the skills, that would depend on could the 3-point shot come around? Could there be maybe some like ancillary, like short roll playmaking and stuff like that? So are you viewing him as a floor or ceiling guy, or both?
I think this is why I ended up so high on him after going back and watching more. Like, it's kind of both for me. I mean, if you look at some of the basketball Africa League stuff when he's 17, I've tweeted some clips. I wrote an article. He shot 33% from 3, on fairly low volume, on like 2 attempts a game or whatever. But it looks fluid. He was hitting like some baseline turnarounds. I mean, this guy is at 7'1" with a 9'4" standing reach.
Yeah.
Which would be top 10 in the NBA, like as soon as he walks into it.
Yeah, for reference, Victor Wembanyama's like 9'7" standing reach, I think. So like, Maluak is right there with him.
And then you look at guys like Donovan Clingan, who sneakily had a very strong rookie year in Portland just by virtue of being big and protecting the rim. Zach Edey, Memphis was better with him on than off. Come on, just played his age 18-year-old season for one of the best college basketball teams in recent memory, picked up a basketball for the first time in 2019, and was an irreplaceable part of that team and was just a monster around the rim on defense. Like, worst case scenario with this guy, if we're talking about floor, he's going to be impossible to score on around the rim. And he can move his feet. I actually think you could play him in a variety of coverages. He's going to, shoot 75% from the line at least. And he can roll quickly to the rim. Teams are going to be worried about him putting pressure on the rim that way. He dunked the ball 81 times this year at Duke. He shot 77% at the rim. There's just so many valuable plus flashing bright green indicators with this guy. And then there might be this, did you see when he was a 17-year-old 7'1" guy hitting corner threes and baseline fadeaways and lefty hooks? Like, he averaged 8 and 6. I get it.
Yeah.
But he is a great prospect. I find myself gravitating to him more and more.
I understand where you're coming from completely. And, I think there's, I'm not sure, I'm not sure because of what you said. Like, there's some people who have him in, top 3, 4, 5 on their big board. And then there's some people who I've talked to who are like, of this group, I've asked them the same question. Who's the most likely to fall, do you think, to the Nets out of this group of players? And they said Maluach. So,
yeah,
I don't know ultimately, but the way that I think Nets fans would react to it, like the floor versus ceiling debate that I've talked about, is I think so many Nets fans have been it's so obsessed with ceiling. We need to go for ceiling. First lottery pick since 2010. And I understand that. And I think they should go for ceiling. And I think Maluach does have ceiling, but you need to have some floor too, because you need to you don't want, obviously, this just to be a bust. You need a guy who has projectable, NBA traits and things that he's bringing to the table. And like you said, for Maluach, those are just all over, those are everywhere. Let's talk about the defense first. We'll get a little bit more into the offense because he's a defense, you're drafting him for his defense. That's he's the best defender probably in or best center, obviously, defender in this class. And some of the things that he's able to do, the block numbers weren't great, but I think just based on the tape, it's clear that he was a serious deterrent at the rim for Duke. And like you said, he can move his feet. I've watched some clips of him, sliding his feet on the perimeter, flipping his hips, running in transition. The dude kind of runs like a gazelle for someone who's 7'1", and he has the length that is just absurd to go along with. And for a guy who only started playing basketball when he was competitive basketball when he was 15 years old,
14, 5 years.
Years old, 5 years. He's a pretty intelligent defender
as
well. So,
and if you talk to scouts, he got better every week at Duke, picking up more. He was, I don't want to say lost in November, but pretty unsure. And you get to the film in March, April, he's calling out coverages. He knows where to be. He's up at the level. He's rotating. That stuff is super intriguing. And just, I'm glad you touched on sort of the lower block rates than maybe you would expect for a guy that size. And I wrote on Nets Daily, with guys with a comparable wingspan, that much of a force at the rim, his block rate lower than guys like Jalen Duren, Daniel Gafford in their last year of school, Jackson Hayes, right? But all those guys had really serious still have really serious room to grow in terms of being defenders around the rim, chasing blocks, being in position. He was so committed to not fouling, remaining vertical, not biting on pump fakes that, occasionally a guy could sneak a layup or a floater over him. He's not the most impressive vertical leaper, but his rim deterrence, the amount of shots guys don't take at the rim, the amount of shots guys get altered at the rim, is truly one of one in this class.
And for me, the way, just the combination of what I said, the way he's able to run straight line, the way he's able to slide his feet and move horizontally, and the way he's able to flip his hips and change direction, when you couple that with the length that he has from a wingspan, standing reach, all those measurables, not a bad athlete whatsoever. When you put those things together and you have people who are, high on what he was able to do from a processing standpoint. That leads me to believe, or that just makes me extremely high on what he can be as a defender at the next level. And just, the ranginess and the ways that he'll be able to muck up the game and just completely throw an offense out of sorts. Extremely high on that. Let's get to the offense then also, because I think the biggest thing he brings to the table is just a lob threat. He had a lot of great connections with Canipple, another guy we're going to talk about on that pick and roll. And there could be some other things that could develop there. So what excites you about that end from him?
Yeah, I mean, he just gets from the perimeter to the rim in the blink of an eye, and that's going to put pressure on defenses at the NBA level. Like, sometimes he can't explode through contact, and he'll get pushed off his base, like jumping through bodies, getting contested offensive rebounds. That is occasionally a struggle for him. Obviously room to improve with him being 18 for this year. But when you think about a guy in a high major conference, I know the ACC had a down year, shooting 77% at the rim and at the free throw line. This guy's going to make your paint offense better. He hit hook shots too, both hands, soft touch. There's this kind of hidden star or hidden, upside with the 3-point shooting. It's hard to imagine him being like a true negative on offense, even if that stuff doesn't pop.
Yeah, and I totally agree, especially as, the rim rolling, like you have that as a built-in skill. Can he potentially be a playmaking out of there? I think he showed some things in that regard.
Yeah.
And,
a couple plays here and there where, he'd hit, he'd screen a guy with the ball in his hand and then hit like, kind of a handoff sort of thing. But
yeah. So there's something there. I think the free throw rate is really encouraging from a touch perspective. And the 3-point shot, I think, is going to be something that obviously will play, if that was able to hit, then you have a guy who is an elite rim protector and a guy who can space the floor like that. There aren't many of those in the NBA. And, he had a hand or wrist injury at Duke. He was wearing a glove for a large portion of the season, which he said impacted the way that he shot threes. I was at the combine in Chicago. I watched and videotaped all of his shooting drills on catch and shoot, stationary threes, and also like on their like star drill, which is like the conditioning. He hit 12 out of 25 on both of those. That's 48% unguarded, for a guy his size. It's not bad whatsoever. So there could be something there. And if that's able to hit and you're able to have a guy who can be that rim roller, who can be a floor spacer and can also do the things that he does defensively, there's few prospects who can do all of those things. And the 3-point shooting is a big if. I'm by no means saying that that's definitely going to hit. So I'm extremely high on him as a prospect. Last thing I think we'll say about him, and then we'll get to other, things. I was at his interview at the media availability at the combine. Just seems like a great kid too. Like his story, obviously, he's a South Sudanese refugee, and just the way that he had to grow up, the self-awareness that he has, the way that Canipple and Flagg have both talked about him. They both raved about him from personality standpoint. I think the Nets would love everything that they get from him in that regard, through the interview process and all that. And he has all these traits, which I think, it's it would be a very, very good outcome, I think, if he fell to them at 8 and they were able to come away with a player who has that level of floor and potential upside. It's going to take a quick break now, and then we'll come back. We get to who's next on Lucas's ranking out of those 4 and what excites us about that player. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at Car Gurus. Shopping for a car should be exciting, not exhausting. But between the confusing prices and hidden fees, it can feel overwhelming. That's why I love using Car Gurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With over 4 million listings, Car Gurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the U.S. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second-guessing yourself. Guys, do you need a deal you can trust? Car Gurus makes it easy to compare vehicles side by side with unbiased deal ratings, the best features, price drop alerts, so you know exactly when the perfect car is available for your budget. Plus, the in-depth vehicle details give you peace of mind before stepping onto any lot. Buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at cargurus.com. Go to cargurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's cargurus.com, cargurus.com. Coming back from the break, talking with Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily about the Nets' most realistic options at 8 and who we'd like to see them target. Lucas, we said Kaman Malawach, Jeremiah Fierce, Canipple, Noah Asenge were the 4 guys that we were locked in on. Malawach at the top was your first choice. Who would you come in after that as exciting you most?
Yeah, I'm between the other Duke guy, which I know Nets fans will love, and Noah Asenge. They're very different prospects.
Okay.
Also, one correction, I looked at it at the break. Malawach's standing reach is 9'6", 9.5 feet.
He's at like Wemby level.
Yeah, Rudy Gobert is 9'7" for reference. They're just very, very different prospects. And Fears is in there too. I think this, talk yourself into any of them. It really depends on, Brooklyn's scouting, intel. Like you could go either way right here. I think the sell with Canipple is that the athleticism concerns are very real. And it's hard to imagine him playing in a game like Game 5 of the finals, where guys are flying around the court with force. His lane agility time, stuff like that. It was like a 7-footer. It was like Ryan Kalkbrenner.
For reference, he was, I don't know what the second time is, but there were 73 players who tested at the combine for lane agility, and he was 68th, I think, out of them.
Yeah.
So that gives you an idea of where he was at. Like, we're at he's faster than Derek Queen, but Derek Queen was last, and he's in that category for that.
Certainly. And yet you don't often get to select guys at 8 who have shown that level of shooting, off the dribble creation, passing, and generally just scalability on offense. I think that is the most intriguing part of Canipple's profile, where you look at his numbers with Cooper Flagg off the floor, you look at his numbers in EYBL, the nation's top AAU circuit, where he was primary ball handler, got a lot of buckets against good competition, the same way he did at Duke. And then next to Flagg, next to even Tyrese Proctor, filling in the gaps. Efficiency goes up, assist to turnovers go up, even if, the pure volume goes down. So I think the sell with Canipple is this is going to be a guy that's going to be a positive offensive player in any lineup construction, almost from day one, with a ton of room to grow, albeit as a slightly older freshman.
Yeah, we'll talk about Canipple and Asenge in this segment because that sounded like the 2 guys you were between, and then we'll hit on Fears in the final one. But on Canipple, the athletic concerns I think are real. In some regards, the lane agility was bad, but there were other things his shuttle time was really good. His shuttle time was better than Cooper Flagg and VJ Edgecombe. He came in near 37-inch max vertical, which I think surprised a lot of people. I think we all know why. That was, so there were some good numbers there. There were some bad numbers there. But yeah, like you said, he's a guy who at every level he's played at, high school, EYBL, freshman season at Duke, going all the way to the Final Four, has been highly productive, and at Duke showed a real malleability to his skill set, which I think is going to be intriguing to any, NBA front office, at least offensively. And when you look at him, obviously has the elite skill as a dead-eye movement three-point shooter. We've seen what Jordi Fernandez has done with Cam Johnson and the way that he's been able to get him open. Khan will be able to do all those things and, hit shots off of those types of sets and that movement. And then beyond that, the ancillary, putting it on the floor, being able to score around the rim, being able to play make, that stuff is really encouraging. And when you look at, let's use Cam Johnson as a frame of reference. I think Nets fans, that'll be when you look at what Cam Johnson has been able to grow into these last couple seasons with the Nets in terms of a secondary shot creator and playmaker. Do you think, how do you think that Con Canipple's, trajectory in that regard, where he can compare to Cam there? Because the 3-point shooting, he's going to be a good 3-point shooter.
So he doesn't, so he doesn't have the margin of error that Cam Johnson does just because of the size. And maybe a slightly, lesser athletic profile, although Cam Johnson, was not by any stretch a plus athlete prospect, other than his size.
And wait, before you go on, must also say this is Khan's a freshman. Cam played 4 years of college basketball. So
as did our other favorite comparison, Joe Harris.
Yeah.
Who Nets fans will obviously comp him to a lot, and I wrote about this. Khan makes like 5 or 6 or 7 plays a game at 19 at Duke that Joe Harris and to an extent Cam Johnson didn't make until they were like 27 years old, 28 years old. So the buy-in there is that this guy, at every level, one and done prospect who has been able to get, if not totally ISO off the dribble, good offense, just extending advantages, creating some advantages. He is a really strong playmaker out of like regimented pick and roll reads. And what I mean by that is like he throws the lob if, the drop coverage guy steps up. If the low man comes over, he throws the skip pass. I have no doubt he'll be able to make all those reads almost, from day one. I don't think he'll turn the ball over a lot or take a lot of bad shots. Like, I think he's going to juice your offense that way, where he gets into the lane, it's a 2-foot stop almost all the time. And if he doesn't have like a layup or a little floater or a lob, whatever, it's a kick out and he keeps the offense moving. Coaches are going to love that. I think it's going to raise his, just overall floor. Like, he's not going to be taking a lot of bad shots. And even the tough shots he does take, I think he has the touch to make a lot of them. I would encourage fans to go if they can find like that last Duke UNC game, just one of the better prospect games of the year from Khan. Some ridiculous shot making there, all around offensive control.
Yeah, his tape towards the end of the season, like there was just a lot to like there, and really like high leverage moments.
Yeah.
And I want to round it out on him so we have time to get to the other guys. But just looking at his tape, what he's able to do with the 3-point shooting, what the other encouraging aspects of his game from a processing standpoint, and the way that he's able to play, I just think that there's a ton to like there. And I think Nets fans, like I talked to him about him on a prior pod, and I got like 3 comments in the section that were like, is this a Joe Harris guy? Like, are we just going to draft a Joe Harris with the 8th pick? And I said, like you said, like Khan was doing stuff early in his freshman year that like we didn't see Joe do until the 3rd or 4th year of his NBA career. So that was like 6-7 years later in his development. So just completely different prospect, far more advanced prospect. I get the defensive concerns based on, he's 6'5" barefoot. So based on like the size, based on some of the athletic profile stuff, but he's a guy who's, scrappy, and he's definitely going to compete on that end of the floor. So you have that with Khan. He's one of the, higher floor prospects in the draft, and there is some ceiling there definitely to get excited about. Going to Noah Asenge before we take a break and round out this episode, a ton to like there about his skill set. What, what'd you see on tape that really like gave you, encouragement?
Again, it's more of a physical bet. Like, you just don't see guys that are 6'10", 6'9", with like 9-foot plus standing reach, super long arms, be able to move that fluidly. I think he's a high feel guy immediately, like makes good extra passes, rotates around the floor defensively. And again, if this doesn't sound like a high ceiling guy off rip, he is the second youngest prospect in the class behind Cooper Flag. Playing valuable minutes in a good German league team, which is a decent European league team. He's just going to be a plug and play guy, you think, at his best anywhere, like secondary ball handling in transition. He has this super long stride length where he can get to the rim in a dribble from the free throw line, 2 long steps, he's at the rim. You expect him to really have to put on weight, and you can get into the biomechanical weeds of, he's going to have to be a much more physical driver and defender. But if you believe he can put on that weight, it's hard to imagine him, again, failing as an NBA player with a guy that can cover that much ground and make the right play as often as he does.
Yeah, when you talk about the youth, like you said, second youngest player in the draft, he's only 3 days older than Cooper Flag. He was producing at a good level for Ratio Farm in the BBL over there in Germany, which, like you said, decent European league. Started the season at 17 years old, was playing real minutes for them, which I've talked to a lot of people who spend time, overseas scouting, and something that they've emphasized to me was like a lot of EuroLeague teams, like you'll see prospects who are going to be NBA prospects, guys who will get drafted now, who don't get the amount of minutes that Asenge has gotten, just because a lot of EuroLeague teams are hesitant to play guys who are that young big minutes. And he's been a guy who's played, is averaging over like 20 minutes a game around there, a guy who started the year at 17 years old. The skill set, like there's just a lot of green flags for him in terms of, the free throw rate is extremely high. He's like at 8 attempts per 36 minutes. He shot it well on those attempts. I think the thing that'll be the drawback, obviously, is the 3-point shot isn't where it needs to be in terms of a guy with, going to be like a star level upside guy. And the ball handling like in the half court needs to be improved. But there's reason to be encouraged that those things can improve. And also, like you said, there's just so much room for growth based on the youth and the things that even if he isn't able to, improve those things, he has the skill set of where, just the things that he'll be able to do in terms of his athletic profile and the measurables. Like he came in on the measurements, and I think these came in the other day. He was 6'10" barefoot, 7'1" wingspan, 9'2" standing reach, 204 pounds. So he'll need to put on weight, but those are insane measurables for a guy who can do the things that he can do in terms of being, a ball handler type guy in transition or the other things that he'll be able to do. So, before we take a break, like if you're looking at him, I think it's tough to pinpoint like an exact archetype or like mold. Like, do you have a player who you could see him growing in like a similar like trajectory to?
It's maybe based on just their nationality, but like, and it won't look the same, but like, I think about Nico Batum, who became a 40% sniper, and especially later in his career, but just a guy that like fills in every gap and is able to be a smart cutter, be kind of everywhere on defense, can play like, can vanish 2-on-1 advantages for the offense with his length and his movement. Nico Batum at his best was doing that. So the hope is that, plus if he fills out, especially his upper body, and is able to take and withstand contact on drives, that is a really scary offensive player, half court transition, because right now he just does not have the strength to take contact, en route to the rim. He'll turn a lot of his drives into like, quasi post ups because he's not comfortable going full speed. But you can just imagine him like, obviously, Giannis light is still a crazy comparison, but just 2 dribbles from half court to the rim, little dunk,
I've had that thought. I've had that thought just in terms of the measurables and some of the dexterity and things that he's able to do. Now, is he going to be able to turn physically into just like the absolute beast that Giannis has? We'll see. But like I understand where you're going with that. And those are all reasons where I think there's an upside case, obviously, with the Senge, and there's also a floor case based on how he's been able to produce at the pro level at such a young age and some of the just like the floor, like baseline traits that he brings to the table. So going to take one more break, and we come back, going to talk about the last guy, Jeremiah Fears, and what there is to like and why he fell, where he did amongst this 4 in the group. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at Wayfair. There's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. If you're wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair has made it so easy to turn it into a space that feels like yours. Comfortable, stylish, and ready for summer. Wayfair has everything you need to level up your outdoor space. Conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, and yes, even the perfect string lights to set the vibe. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without the resort price tag. Guys, are you looking to redesign your patio this summer? Maybe your style leans more towards clean and modern. You'll love being able to filter and find exactly what fits your space and budget. The delivery is free, fast, and totally hassle-free, even with larger items. Don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. Closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, talking with Lucas Kaplan about the most realistic options for the Nets with the 8th overall pick. We already hit on 3. Kaman Maluach, Canipple, Noah Asenge, Jeremiah Fears. Sounds like you were the lowest on among the group. A lot of Nets fans really excited about this guy. A guy I've heard that the Nets do like, and so he
Yeah.
definitely has a real possibility for them here. But what's the drawback for you, the main one?
Again, just my opinion. I don't do this full-time, full-time draft scouting. I would just say it's hard to imagine for me a 6'1" guard, 6'1 and a half, whatever, who struggles.
6'2.5".
6'2 and a half. Sorry, 6'2.
Okay, it's what he came in at.
All right. Don't mean to undersell him, but
Yeah.
he is I actually believe in the shot. Like you see the 28% 3-point shooting. He shot well on long twos. Some of the shots he made from three were ridiculously tough. He's a good prospect, like insane usage on an Oklahoma team, on an SEC team, managed to be productive, got to the line all the time. His playmaking, floor reading improved throughout the season. And yet he was not good when he got into the paint. He is a long, long way to go as a paint finisher. He's not really an explosive 2-foot guy that you saw, like some of his comps, like De'Aaron Fox shot 64% at the rim in college his freshman year. Kemba Walker shot 58% his last year. Like 2-foot, getting guys, on his back, shielding him with his body. Fears 50% at the rim, 51% at the rim. The tape kind of matched it. He would get overwhelmed sometimes trying to pass through guys like in the paint. And if you're betting on like a rim pressure guy, break down his defender, get into the teeth of the paint, I don't want that to be the area where he struggles the most. And that to me is the worrisome thing. Now, you could easily talk yourself into him if you buy the shot and he's so young and he'll physically develop and everyone says he's such a hard worker. But that's kind of where I am like, you got to be so good in the NBA to be a smaller guard that is like a primary option, high usage guy. And he struggles in some key areas that for me have me a little bit lower. I don't think he's a bad prospect any means, but that's kind of where I'm at.
And I understand that completely. And it's interesting. So you're talking about the offensive drawbacks, and it must be stated, like, before we get into anything, he's also one of the youngest players in the draft.
Yeah.
He's a player who reclassified. If he didn't, he'd be, going into his freshman year right now. He would have been a high school senior this past season and did produce, at a high level while shouldering a really heavy burden for an otherwise pretty bad Oklahoma offense. So he has that going for him. Yeah, the drawback for me with Fears has been just this player archetype, like overall, like you said, just guards who are, he's not necessarily undersized. Like he was 6'2.5" barefoot, so probably plays at like a little over 6'3", but slighter frame, could grow into it because I just said he is really young. But guards who are somewhat undersized, aren't great defenders. There are questions about the 3-point shot, although a lot of people think it's going to come around. That's just an archetype that I think is really tough to build around in today's NBA, where everything is trending towards more size, more versatility. We're seeing it in these NBA finals. So that has been the drawback. I understand the potential that some people see, with him offensively. And I think a lot of front offices have bought into it. Like I talked to Rafael Barlow about, what he's heard on Fears. And he said that he talked to a front office that had him ranked as their number 2 guy on their big board. So, I understand where people are coming at with that. The archetype thing that I'm talking about, you talked about the offense. How much do the defensive concerns, factor into what you're talking about with him?
Yeah, they're not like the primary thing, because I think if he's such a great offensive player, you don't really, if the Nets believe he's going to be this great offensive player, you take the defensive concerns and you work on them to the best of your ability. But it does go to show that, like, again, I keep bringing it back to the NBA playoffs. If you're, one of the smaller guys on the court, they are going to target you all the time. Yeah. In addition to having to fly around off the ball, rotate coverages, rotate on the perimeter, come over and help side, all that stuff. And so at 6'3", right, in shoes, the burden on him is going to be really high. He's going to be a pretty, poor defender for the first couple of years of his career. I think you can write that in pen. He has 3% steal rate. He would use his length and athleticism to, front the post, reach around that way, like play some passing lanes. But again, it kind of speaks to the larger point in that at his size, the margin of error is just so low, and you need to be able to not excel, but be above average at so many different things on the basketball court. And that is, to me, maybe a more worrisome bet on
Yeah.
Jeremiah Fears.
Yeah, and I understand where the allure is with him offensively. Like,
Right.
if you watch him play, like the stop and start ability, the
Yep.
downhill speed, the ball handling, some of the things that he's able to do create separation, really like tantalizing stuff. And people I've spoken with based on his free throw percentage aren't too worried about his 3-point shot. A lot of them thought shot diet played into that. So
Yeah.
they have some confidence that he'll be able to, if he cleans that up and part of it's not even him, it's just the role he was playing in Oklahoma, that he'll be able to come around with that. What you said about the finishing is also a concern. If you believe he'll get better with that as he puts on, more weight, maybe somewhat of an outlier with some of that stuff. Like, if you believe in that, there's an offensive skill set that you could be really excited about. So I understand where people are coming at with that. And I got to say it again, I've heard older draft people say it, some other things that I've heard myself, that the Nets like him.
Yeah.
And I spoke with him at the combine. I asked him at that point what teams he had met with. He said he'd met with the Nets. And as he said it, he cracked a smile that was like past ear to ear. So I'm not like saying to read into that. I'm just, take it for what you will. Like, you can find the clip. I posted it online. So there is some smoke surrounding Fears and the Nets. Will he get to 8? It's kind of tough to say. There's some people, as I said, are really high on him, could see him going at, see him not getting past Utah or Washington. I've seen other big boards and mock drafts that have him in like the late teens, early 20s. So really wide range, it seems like, on him. Last thing, just want to ask you touched on some of the comps there, but on the high end, like, if he's able to hit and round out some of those less polished aspects, like, do you see a comp for him that you would, that would get you excited?
Yeah, I like Kemba Walker.
Okay.
The handle in space is really intriguing. Like, his ability to make sort of like dynamic reads, like, it's not planned. So, I'm going to come down, tween cross. Like, I have a guy leaning, cross back. Now I'm open. That sort of stuff, super intriguing. Kemba really had to work on like the finer points of not getting swallowed up in the paint and getting overwhelmed and either taking a bad shot or like someone deflecting a kick out pass. And he got really good at it, and maybe he was an older prospect than Fears, played multiple years, in college. And maybe that is a big part of why he was an improved rim finisher. Other than that, fairly similar statistical profiles where you felt like the free throw shooting for Kemba would portend to improved 3-point shooting in his NBA career. And that's exactly what happened. And I could totally see a world where Fears becomes that. And so, again, this is a guy that would be the most exciting young talent on the Nets in some time. He'd be their best teenager since I don't know when. And, he'll have the ball a lot. Brooklyn would be a good spot for him to really work out his game in that sense.
And I think that's why you might be hearing some of the smoke, just in terms of them being able to give him some leeway, some reins, all these things to develop. And Lucas, I think that's going to do it. I think of the guys we touched on with, Fears, Canipple, Maluach, Senge, there's a pretty good chance that one of these 4 will be the Nets pick at 8. And, we're rapidly approaching the draft, and I'll be excited. I'm sure I'll see you at some of the media availability, and we'll have coverage with then. And then maybe we'll circle on for a pod to react to this afterwards. So really appreciate you taking the time. That does it for today's episode of Locked On Nets. Hope you guys really enjoyed the talk with Lucas. I think we did a good job hitting on all those realistic prospects for the Nets with the 8th pick and giving you a good sense of the pros and cons and what comes with each of them. If you do not already, make sure to comment, like, subscribe to this channel on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. But I'll be back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.